On a fine Christmas day, the story's protagonist got hit by a vehicle and woke up in the afterlife, where he met a goddess who gave him a second chance at living. She asked him what he wanted in his new life, and he said he would like to go on adventures with a dragon as his partner. But the goddess insisted that he needed a lover instead, so she formed a spiritual connection between him and his soulmate, adding that in his new world, polygamy was totally allowed. She then kissed him, saying that he would recognize his soulmate through a kiss. Afterwards, she bestowed upon him an ability suited to his potential and flung him into his new world. Takuma woke up in the forest, and suddenly a big black wolf was trying to eat him, but Karate Kid from Temu appeared and took it down in one move. He thanked her for saving his life and asked the girl about her identity and where she came from, to which she replied that her name was Mao. She asked what his mission was there, and he shared that he was searching for his soulmate, but they were interrupted by a loud scream coming from the woods. They ran to find out what had made that noise and found a sus-looking woman who claimed she had been attacked by a dark wolf. But Takuma knew that something was off because the woman's clothes and surroundings looked too neat for a person who had been attacked. Confirming his suspicions, the lady suddenly transformed into a demonic vamp and aimed right for Mao. Takuma tried to distract the vamp using a small piece of rock, but it moved towards it at a high speed and hit it in the jaw. Thereafter, the vamp tried hard to burn Takuma, who then told Mao that they should run or risk getting barbecued. But to his greatest shock, Mao summoned a fireball 1,000,000 times the size of the vamp's and directed it towards him. But even after this, the demon survived and escaped. On his way out, he dropped a little bag, and Takuma checked on Mao, ensuring she had no burns. But he perceived something burning and realized that there was still fire on Mao's back. The moment she sensed the presence of water nearby, she ran towards it, jumped off a cliff, took a dip, and then joked that she was soaking wet. Takuma felt that was too much information for a cultured, creepy uncle, and then he picked her dress to fix the hole in it. Later, Mao thanked Takuma for trying to save her earlier, and decided she would help him find his destined partner and learn all the wonderful things about him, so she would one day tell his soulmate how great he was. For the time being, she suggested finding a town because if they were searching for someone, it had to be somewhere they could find people. Takuma was impressed by her optimism, but suggested that they use a map to guide their footsteps, so Mao used a magical pumpkin to assess what direction they were facing. Apparently, this pumpkin had a face on it, but Mao didn't know, so she plucked the flower off the pumpkin and placed it on Takuma's head, unaware that it had developed into a full-blown creepy sucker. Somehow, Takuma survived that, and they eventually made it to the city, but he could barely catch his breath because they had gotten lost in the forest. Anyway, he was fascinated by this new world that was teeming with men and beastmen alike, and Mao said it was time for them to start searching for his destined partner. So she forced Takuma to place a placard on his neck, hoping his soulmate would locate him. However, she was absolutely disappointed when no one approached them, even after hours had passed. Soon after, Takuma decided to take the placard off, but then an elf walked over to him, asking to talk to him. The moment she saw her, Mao assumed that the girl just had to be Takuma's soulmate. She led them to the guild and started bombarding him with questions about where he got his strange clothes and equipment from when she realized that she hadn't even introduced herself. She did so, saying her name was Liz of the Elf tribe, who was registered as an adventurer at the guild. Takuma and Mao introduced themselves, and Mao blurted out that they had both lost their memories in an accident and didn't remember anything but their own names, but that they had come to the city to find Takuma's soulmate. However, he lied that before losing his memory, he felt he was supposed to meet someone, but right then, his memories were a bit fuzzy. Anyway, Mao was hungry at that time and said she wanted some high-end dessert, but Takuma was as broke as a church rat and told her he had no money. Mao said something about a pretty stone which had dropped when they defeated the beast earlier, and they felt they could at least trade that for food. Liz told them that those were magic stones, which were almost always dropped after defeating magical beasts, and were primarily used as currency. At the reception, a handsome-looking dude named Rain was the attendant whom Liz asked to exchange the magic stones for cash. Liz introduced the receptionist as Rain, and told him that Takuma and Mao had lost their memories due to an accident. He gladly offered to teach them all they needed to know, and showed them that their magic stone was a B rank, and in their world, magic stones had ranks determined by the beast's species and size. He also told them that magic stones could be exchanged at other shops, but because they could get cheated, he didn't recommend that. That being said, B-rank magic stones were rare, and the amount they would get was enough to cover several days' worth of expenses. Because he thought of Takuma as a cute guy, he added a little extra, but Takuma could already see himself getting hit from the back. In any case, he told Rain that he had found Mao alone in the forest and wondered how to reunite her with her family. So Rain suggested that he post his issue on a bulletin board for missing persons, and if Mao was an orphan, she could stay at the church. Takuma asked Mao what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to stay with him and find his soulmate. Obviously, that meant Takuma was stuck with her, so he decided to file a missing persons report. They met with an artist who sketched Mao's face and pasted it. Anyway, Takuma suggested that since they now had money, they could find a place to stay and make a plan, and Liz recommended the inn where she was staying. Takuma said he had to buy some supplies, and when they got to the shops around the inn, they found so much stuff in there, and Takuma noticed the shops felt bigger inside than outside. Liz said it was thanks to the blessings of Mana, but then Mao returned with a chick in her hand, which blew so much wind that it raised Liz's skirt. They continued shopping, but two creeps were tailing them behind, unknown to them. When they were done shopping, Takuma said that they had way too much stuff to carry, so Liz told him to store it in his bag, that is, the magic bag that could hold anything which he had strapped onto his shoulders. To his greatest shock, all his items fit into that bag, and Liz explained again that it was also the blessing of Mana, and bags with storage blessings were rare. Realizing that he knew very little about magic, mana, and all of that, Takuma asked Liz to teach him more, but she said that would be right after she ate his sausage. They were enjoying a nice meal when Liz recommended a dish from her homeland, but the moment they tasted her food, Takuma could only say that the meal tasted healthy, while Mao was honest enough to say it tasted like hair from a dried-up cooch. When they were done eating, Takuma offered to pay, but Liz refused. However, he insisted because she had been helping them so much and at least deserved a treat from them. She accepted their help, and they went their separate ways. On her way home, Liz noticed a guy bent over and was worried about him, and then he said he suddenly felt weak, but the idiot pressed something onto her face, and Liz soon felt dizzy. His partner in crime showed up, asking her how the effect of the paralysis grass was on her. Takuma was excited because elven women were beautiful and rare, so Liz would fetch them a high price. Seeing that Liz was weak and defenseless, one of the guys helped himself to an eyeful, lingering on her melons. He told his partner that they should have some fun before selling her, but right before they could touch a hair on her body, Takuma appeared and shoved him out of the way with a headbutt, asking Liz whether she was strong enough to stand. She explained that she was somewhat paralyzed, and the guys stood up, threatening Takuma with a knife and saying he should leave Liz and disappear if he wanted to remain alive. Takuma wondered what to do because he couldn't escape while carrying Liz, but he remembered that the goddess who sent him to this world had bestowed upon him a special ability suited to his time in the world. He realized he didn't even know his power, and seeing that the kidnappers were growing impatient with him, he knew there wasn't time to keep thinking. So he reached into the magic bag and brought out one of those magic ducklings that could be used to make a magic bag. He brought out one of those magic wind-producing ducklings, and had only expected just a little weak breeze that would serve as a distraction. But the gush of wind released was powerful enough to throw the two fools into the air and onto the floor. After, he immediately ran to check on Liz and held her hand, but Liz imagined herself to be completely undressed, thanks to the effect of the Mary Jane. Takuma asked her if she was okay or hurt, but Liz soon realized that her paralysis was gone and couldn't explain just what had happened. Meanwhile, Mao appeared, joining them, and coincidentally, Takuma suddenly felt dizzy and soon passed out. The next thing he knew, he found himself on a bed, wondering where he was. He called out to Liz and Mao, and Liz called out from the bathroom, so he joined her, running excitedly in her direction, saying he was glad to find her safe. But he was surprised to find that he was in the bathroom with Liz, who was completely undressed, with her nunnus flying in the air. She apologized, feeling embarrassed, but Takuma accidentally hurt himself in the process of closing the curtains. Liz thought it would be nice to heal him right away, but she slipped and fell right on Takuma in the best position ever known to man. To cap the embarrassment, Mao showed up right then and caught them both in the most compromising position ever. Later, Liz apologized for the commotion and thanked Takuma for helping her when she was about to get kidnapped, but he told her that it was he who caused the trouble by passing out. Apparently, Mao had carried Takuma all the way to the inn, so he thanked her, and Liz said she would teach them all about magic and whatnots the following day. She also said that if they wanted anything else, she was willing to explain it, but all Mao thought about then was how they would find Takuma's destined partner. That was the least of his problems, though, because he had to learn how to live in that town, how to find people, and about the whole mana thing. He then told Mao that the most important thing was learning how to earn money, so they would head to the guild and gain more information about their whole earning process. Later that night, Takuma realized that he had been flowing with everything up to that point, and he was glad that he met Mao and Liz because so many terrible things would have happened to him otherwise, especially getting eaten by that big bad wolf. Just then, Mao sleepily walked into his room, asking to sleep beside him until he tucked her in and put her to sleep. The girl said that a lot had happened that day and they had so much fun, so she was eager for the excitement they would encounter the next day. The next morning, Liz taught Takuma that the quickest way to earn was by completing guild requests, and since guilds were present in various locations around the world, Takuma wouldn't ever run out of work. He, however, felt he couldn't handle requests to defeat magical beasts, but Mao told him to leave the strong enemies to her. At the reception, they told him to write his name on a piece of paper, and that was all he needed to be registered as an adventurer. Mao was excited and said she wanted to defeat magical beasts and earn money right away. But the receptionist, Rin, said that they both were not allowed to take on magical beast extermination requests just yet. Due to the ranking system that he had explained to them the previous day, he explained that just like magical beasts, adventurers also had ranks, and an adventurer could only accept a request that matched their rank. Currently, Takuma and Mao were at the lowest rank, which was F class, and the only requests they could take were city cleanups of material collection. Liz told them that if they wanted to hunt magical beasts, they would need to pass a rank-up exam and at least become D-class adventurers. Takuma said it would be pretty easy, but Rain said that reaching the D-class wasn't so easy because they would have to defeat a few D-class magical beasts outside the city. This was said by a young man who had suddenly come up behind Takuma and asked if he was taking his first subjugation request. Mao asked the guy who he was, and he introduced himself as Lega, a very strong adventurer on whom they could rely if things went haywire. Apparently, Lega had also helped Liz when she first came to that town, so he was dependable. Rin suggested that Takuma and Mao should consider ranking up, and seeing that Takuma was rather hesitant, he told him that D-class magical beasts weren't that strong and their rewards were way higher than F-class requests. That instantly got Takuma and Mao pumped, and they decided to take the rank-up exam. Rin went to fetch the request form, while Liz said she would find a request for herself. On the other hand, some people looking at the request board noticed one that paid more than usual, which was an exploration request for a nearby forest that had apparently appeared out of nowhere. Takuma was rather surprised and asked what they meant by a forest that suddenly appeared. He asked Liz whether she knew those dudes she was talking to, and she said she didn't, but going alone for her would be dangerous, and since they offered to accompany her, that was a double win for her. However, she turned them down because she had accepted the same request as Takuma and Mao had done, at the expense of those dudes getting angry enough to chew her out. They were glad that she would accompany them, and she said they still had to learn about mana and get their gear ready. Rin permitted Liz to take anything she desired from the storage room, and they walked into a place that was filled with all sorts of equipment. These were apparently from experienced adventurers who left their usable gear for beginners, so Takuma and Mao could get some for free. After browsing the place for a while, Takuma got some sort of adventurer kit, which consisted of light gear with mana-blessed items, as well as shoulder guards and boots with enhanced defense and agility, and a short sword and a travel bag. For Mao, the armor she chose made her look like a little bedbug or ladybird, so that obviously didn't work. Takuma asked if they could use some leather and clothing materials, and Liz said they could, but it wouldn't make a difference. However, in the end, Takuma turned up with a pretty nice outfit for Mao. With how beautiful her dress looked, she was excited and asked if he was a craftsman, but he said that it was just a hobby. Later, they arrived at the forest and found a D-class magical beast known as the rabbit hawk. Takuma said it was so cute that he wondered whether he could defeat it, but Liz told him that the hawk's appearance was often deceiving, and if left alone, it would steal cargo and ruin crops, so all they had to do was defeat it and bring back the magic stone. They both excitedly went to defeat the magic hawk, but Takuma shied away from it, like the coward he was, and left. Mao ended up trying to explain that it wasn't as scary as he made it out to be. It was because he had never taken an animal's life before, and he confessed that it might take some time to get used to doing so perhaps he would do ranged attacks on magic. The first thing was that he didn't know how to use magic, so Liz told him that for magic, he needed mana. Mana was the source of magic, apparently, which was born from mana trees, and such were scattered across the world, making mana exist in the atmosphere, even while invisible, just like air. Liz explained that mana in various amounts resided in all things, such as rivers, plants, magic beasts, and even humans, and so to cast spells, humans consumed the mana within them. She also said that when an object was imbued with mana, granting it special effects, it was called a mana blessing, and it was an essential part of their daily life, imbued in things such as street lights and heated water. To use magic, Liz demonstrated that they would have to feel the mana flowing within their body, focus it into their palms, and release it towards their target. The moment she did this, the rabbit was hit and defeated, releasing a magic stone. Mao replicated what she did, and Takuma remembered that he had seen her use fire magic before. She demonstrated it by releasing her ginormous fireball, but he told her to try making a smaller one instead. When she released the smaller size, Liz told her she was incredibly talented with magic, while Takuma wondered if he was just a big bozo or if he could actually use magic. He assumed the stance as Liz had taught him, but when he tried releasing magic, nothing happened. Mao even thought he was sleeping, even though he claimed to be concentrating, but Liz explained that humans had lower mana reserves, so grasping the technique might be harder for someone like Takuma. She tried guiding his mana by holding his hand in hers, and even after moments passed, nothing happened. Apparently, Takuma possessed a ridiculously low amount of mana, and when he heard this, he wailed for his butchered aura because a girl such as Mao had more hope than he did. Just then, they noticed smoke coming from the forest, and Liz ran to check it out while they continued their exam. However, Mao and Takuma insisted on tagging along, and other adventurers who were at the site of the smoke were faced with a beast, an A-rank beast that they hadn't been informed about. The scary monster sent the terrified adventurers running in different directions, and one of the guys was its next target, but Liz came to his rescue, wielding a flail which he struck against the rabbit's spikes. The guy got away and explained later that they had been exploring the forest when they were suddenly attacked by a giant rabbit, which scattered their group in different directions. Anyway, Liz said she'd draw the magic beast's attention while they took the chance to escape, but right then the monster aimed for her. Luckily, Mao kicked it, pushing it away from Liz before Liz could react, and then she told Liz that she would help her take down the monster while Takuma catered to the injured. Both girls tried to attack the beast, but even when their attacks landed, they weren't doing much damage, and so Liz advised that they buy some time and then retreat. But just then the monster finally landed one on Liz, which she luckily could barely block off with her mace. As the Morning Star Ball got disengaged from the spear, Mao stepped in on her behalf and sent magical attacks towards the beast, but the magic got deflected back towards Mao, and a huge explosion occurred. Meanwhile, Takuma was taking care of an injured girl when he heard a massive explosion, but he immediately headed back to find out what was going on. He left the wounded adventurer girl with another guy and arrived at the battleground only to find Mao lying on the ground while Liz faced the beast all by herself. Takuma rushed over to Mao and found that she was still breathing but in pain, saying she let her guard down but still could fight. He told her not to push herself and administered a drinking portion to her, and she felt something warm flowing from Takuma towards her. On the other hand, he noticed that Liz had also taken a hit, and the monster was inches away from crushing her. However, he distracted it and dragged it in a different direction, away from the girls, even though he was pretty scared. However, he noticed that the beast was slow and suspected that if he kept running through the trees, he could probably shake the beast off. However, he noticed that the monster was summoning a powerful magical attack aimed right towards him. He couldn't blame himself because this beast was one that even veteran adventurers couldn't handle, and so he couldn't let his guard down, so he pushed himself to go deeper into the forest. Unfortunately, he felt all the strength in his body leaving him, yet the beast remained nigh. Soon, Takuma's vision began to fade, and all he could hope for was that the girls escaped safely. The next thing was a goth baddie who picked him up in one arm, saying it was all her fault that everything happened. She channeled her magical powers towards the giant rabbit and transformed it into a small, harmless one, which soon flew away, leaving a magic stone behind. She gently laid Takuma on the ground, saying she was glad that he was okay. But as she gradually began to disappear, she realized her time was up already, even though she wanted to spend more time talking to him. She said she would see him again and planted a kiss on his cheek. On the other hand, Lega finally arrived at the scene where one of the adventurers led him to find the beast, but to his ultimate surprise, the beast had disappeared. Lega wondered if everyone was safe and confirmed that the beast was suddenly gone. He also saw Takuma, Liz and Mao huddled up together with a magic stone that was a level. The next day, Liz congratulated Takuma and Mao on passing the promotion exam to D rank, but they both felt bummed out because neither of them could defeat the beast and Takuma could only run away. Liz told them she was also powerless against an A-rank beast, but she told Takuma that, for protecting the adventurers, he had been promoted to D rank and should take pride in that. He realized he had to get stronger, and Mao said she would also get stronger so she could save up money and help Takuma search for his soulmate. Just then, Liz overheard Mao speaking and asked if it was true that he was seeking his soulmate, but Mao responded, even though Takuma wondered it hushed, saying that the gods told him so. Eventually, Takuma said his memory was fuzzy, but Liz told him that if it was a divine prophecy, then they certainly had to find his fated partner because perhaps that person needed Takuma as well. To worsen Takuma's already existing dilemma, Mao opened her big mouth and said that Takuma could recognize his soulmate with a kiss and instantly sent sparks flying in the air, even though she felt it was so romantic. This new revelation triggered some feelings in Liz, who said it was a pretty mature move to kiss anyone. She was already blushing when Mao suggested that Liz and Takuma should also kiss. Already, Liz felt like exploding with embarrassment, so Takuma warned Mao not to trouble her any further. Mao quickly apologized for suggesting that they both kiss, and Takuma also apologized for bringing up weird stuff. But he affirmed that the gods gave him that piece of information about his soulmate, and it was messing with his head. Liz said that it was understandable because she was in a similar situation, searching for the savior. Apparently, a prophet from the Elven Kingdom received a divine revelation that a savior had appeared in their world from another realm and must be found and assisted. And this was why she left the Elven Kingdom in search of him. The situation instantly sounded similar to Takuma's, so he asked her if a savior's existence meant that something disastrous was going to happen. She then told him he seemed to have forgotten everything, which was that their world was being threatened by the Demon King. Takuma wondered about this because the gods hadn't told him to save the world when he reincarnated. He said their world seemed peaceful, but Liz said it was because they were far from the Demon King's domain. But recently, since the Demon King's army had become more noticeable, and a sense of unease occupied the atmosphere. Anyway, Mao asked what sort of person the savior was, so Liz told her that the savior was a young, extraordinarily talented and strong-willed person who accomplished great deeds. Soon after she said this, Takuma knew he was not the man because he was anything but talented, and he had not accomplished anything at all. Anyway, Liz said she had failed to gather more information on the savior in that town, so she was moving to another to see what she could get. Takuma asked her if she was going all by herself, because even though she was strong, it was pretty dangerous to go alone, and so she decided to hire some companions. Excitedly, Mao offered to go with her, planning to get stronger along the way and dragging Takuma down with her. However, Takuma said he felt it was a journey that required veteran adventurers. Liz insisted that even if she just left the Elf Kingdom, she knew being with Takuma and Mao would make her feel much safer, and they should take care of her. Mao said that she would protect Takuma if he ever got in trouble, and that was it. Liz said she planned to head to the royal capital, but another elf overheard their conversation, and she asked whether she could tag along with them for a bit. This stranger introduced herself as Noel, a dwarf saved by Takuma during the last expedition. She had given up and thought she was going to die until Takuma administered a super healing potion. He was glad for her but asked what it was about the potion, so she explained that the moment she drank it, her deep wounds healed in an instant. According to the lady, Takuma seemed to have an insane ability that enhanced potions to resurrection-level quality. Mao told her that Takuma couldn't use magic because he had no mana, but Noel was convinced that it was a delayed enhancement that caused that potion to work well. Besides, she was a genius toolsmith who could grant mana blessings. In fact, she had an invention she was so proud to show off, which was created to help one visualize contained mana as an aura. Essentially, all they had to do was look through the globe, and one would instantly know their capability. She had seen immense amounts of mana radiating from the girls, but the moment she looked through the globe, Takuma had not a single speck of mana at all. She suddenly switched on him, wondering what a dull, sketchy old dude was doing on a journey, claiming he talked to God and all. However, Mao spoke up, saying Takuma was actually brave and kind despite being weak, and Liz said he had also saved her when she was attacked. However, Noel suspected that Takuma must have done lewd stuff and maybe peeked when she was bathing. She assumed that he was the worst of people, especially after Liz somewhat gave away that Takuma had once peeked in on her bathing. In the end, Noel said that since Takuma saved her life, she could manage him despite his unreliability as a travel partner. Yet, she was completely shocked to find a human with 0 mana because she hadn't ever before. Eventually, they set out for the royal capital, and Takuma ran with Mao on his back, trying to do some exercise while walking. He encountered one of those creepy rabbits, pulled out his knife and slashed it instantly, so the girls were proud of him. But Noel asked him how he felt as an old guy with 0 mana, who was a novice adventurer who had no future. Later, while they walked deeper, they encountered some kids who ran hastily towards them, pointing them in the direction of their house, as they had assumed that Takuma and his girls were adventurers who had taken on a certain guild request to help them out. Takuma tried to explain that they weren't, and the boy called his older sister to show her that some adventurers had come. First of all, the girl apologized to them, saying they had been waiting for adventurers who had accepted their request to show up. The place looked like an orphanage because there were so many children and one caretaker. But just then Mao's big mouth took over yet again, and she asked the lady whether she was Takuma's soulmate. Anyway, much later, Takuma and the girls found out from the Lady Ara that a magical beast was residing in a cave near the orphanage and causing trouble for everyone. Even after they had posted a subjugation request to the guild, no one had come to check it out because it wasn't urgent and the reward was low. Apparently, the lady had hurt and twisted her ankle trying to run away from the monster. With determination, Mao said that they would take down the beast because they couldn't leave them helpless. Takuma and Liz said they were all in, but Noel said she was out because even though she would like to help, adventuring was no charity job, so she had to still harden her heart to keep her bucks flowing. Takuma sent all the cute ones to plead with Noel, but she was enraged because they cheated and played on her emotions. Takuma took that as a yes, and they set out to the cave behind the orphanage, which was at danger level D. Noel noticed that mana was starting to gather, and the cave was soon going to become a dungeon. This was because whenever magical beasts settled in a cave, mana built up and transformed the cave into a dungeon. For now, all they had to do was defeat all the beasts in the cave. Mao and Noel took the lead excitedly so they could beat up beasts and find rare magic ores. Takuma worried that they weren't safe given the magical beasts and traps, but Liz said that since it wasn't a dungeon yet, they should be just fine. On the way, Mao encountered 2 cute D-rank slimes and held them to play with them, but one of them gobbled her head up, and she eventually had to grab it and splatter it over the floor. Since slimes were weak magical beasts, they could clear them quickly, and Noel said that even though the magic stones from slimes were trash, their bodily fluids were essential in creating tools. She sent her boomerang to deal with a couple of the slimes, while Takuma sliced at it with his kitchen knife. However, Noel showed up behind him with a grim expression on her face, and he wondered what he had done wrong. Apparently, she was so disgusted that an old man like him was using such a cheap, unimpressive weapon. So she handed him one that looked like a bat. She prepared him for an incoming slime and told him to swing like he was smashing it. He did so and enjoyed the result because the weapon was light and easy to grip like a baseball bat. Noel explained that the weapon was actually specialized for bashing and looked a bit rough, but it had mana blessings, so it had a higher attack power than it appeared. Besides, people who had a hard time taking the lives of animals could use it easily. When she said this, Takuma realized that she had figured his weakness out. She was about to give it to him for free when she insisted that they trade it for whatever materials he dropped. Just then, Mao called Takuma over to a bunch of slimes at the corner, and Noel decided to sneak into the deeper part of the cave while they were busy gathering slimes. But to her utmost shock, Liz had her eyes on her the whole time, and so she had to pretend that she wasn't about to sneak off and grab a rare magic ore or something. Liz was excited that Noel gave Takuma that bat after figuring out his weakness, and her boomerang and club made her wonder what kind of mana blessings they had. Noel shared that it wasn't a big deal, and she hadn't particularly attached any great mana blessings, so she asked her how she could use slime body fluid. Meanwhile, Mao and Takuma had finished the slimes in a certain area, so Takuma said they could go a bit further in, but he saw a giant slime right above their heads and tried to warn them to look up. He was too late because the slime soon engulfed both of them, and they found it difficult to set themselves free. This was a giant slime beast which was ranked C, and only kept pulling the girls deeper into its gooey. Mao tried to pull them out, but was unable to, despite using all her whole strength, while Neo got suffocated as the slime got into her mouth and nostrils. Eventually, she managed to get out with Takuma's help, but when he turned his attention to Liz, he noticed she had passed out completely. Apparently, it was just that the sliminess was too disgusting. But just then, Mao showed him that the pieces of the slime they had torn off were sticking back together and forming a larger, giant slime. This meant the giant slime was made of smaller slimes emerging, and if they defeated the leader, they would eventually scatter, so all they had to do was find the leader among the slimes. Presently, they couldn't even tell which one it was, but Mao felt she could handle it by using wind magic to peel the slime off the two girls. However, Noel told them to use her mana see-through device because it would show that the leader's aura color would be larger than the others. However, even after using it, she still couldn't tell which one of them was the Slime King, as their auras were overlapping and her device was rendered useless. Takuma offered to check using the tool, but Noel told him it wouldn't work at all. However, to her greatest surprise, Takuma found the slime and pulled it the moment he spotted it. But unfortunately, that slime was tickling Liz's meaty pie, and the moment he pulled it off, she exploded. Soon after, all the slimes were dispersed, and the girls were glad to be finally out of that mess. Takuma thanked Noel, saying she had saved them. Noel looked through the mana see-through and actually could pick out the aura of the slime leader. She was shocked because now the mana was super to see, but was surprised and wondered why. That was when she remembered that Takuma had asked to borrow it, which made her suspect that he had done something to it. After the whole ordeal, Liz sent a delivery pigeon with a letter to report the subjugation and a request for the evaluation of that cave. Mercifully, they are taking care of most of the slimes in the cave, so it will be safe for a while. Yet Mao felt that Takuma looked somewhat pale. He claimed he was just tired, so Liz said they should stay for the night. So the orphan girl said they should stay for the night, and even though Takuma wanted them not to bother, Noel jumped on the opportunity. She warned Takuma that the journey back to the royal capital was a long one, so it would be best for an old man like Takuma to rest before he ended up fainting from overexertion. Eventually, everyone agreed to sleep over, and Takuma helped the orphans to fix their frayed clothing. Noel complained that he was busy sewing instead of resting, but he told her that he wouldn't mind patching the hole in her chest because it had been revealing her golden globes. Anyway, Noel was up to some research and told Takuma to grip some items tightly. He held onto a bottle, and she checked it through her mana viewer but noticed that nothing really changed. On the other hand, Mao asked the older girl in the orphanage if she had a man in her life, but she giggled, saying that it's all she had with the kids in her house. For that reason, Mao felt that the sister didn't have a husband and could be Takuma's destined soulmate. Much later, Noel and Liz enjoyed a warm, big bath, and somehow Takuma was allowed to be in their bathing mao. Noel's logic was that it was totally fine for Takuma to be there because even if he attacked them, they were way more powerful than he was. Liz felt that Takuma wouldn't do something like that, but Noel told her to be a little more suspicious of people. The same Noel noted that Takuma seemed easy to deal with and had no ulterior motives, making it a green flag for him to become her future husband. Apparently, she had some goals for her journey with them, and one of those was to find a wonderful and capable husband. Mao was impressed while Noel walked up to Takuma in a very tiny piece of cloth. She then told him that his ability was either an enchanter or an enhancer. The difference was that an enchanter could semi-permanently pour Mana's blessings into objects, while an enhancer could temporarily boost physical abilities or abilities of objects. She explained that she noticed it when Takuma used the Mana see-through and increased the accuracy of the glass by a mile, not to mention the healing potion he had given her following the battle. Takuma couldn't believe this because he didn't have mana and couldn't use any form of magic. Noel agreed with him because normally, such things couldn't be done without mana, and using magic stone mana wasn't really practical. Somehow, this meant that Takuma could use magic if he had magic stones, but Liz said it was inefficient, and he would need about 1,000 slime stones to make a very small fireball. She told him that creating mana from nothing was unheard of, so perhaps it was something else, such as a memory loss, because there had to be activation conditions, which she would investigate. With that in mind, she placed a creepy star sticker on the back of his hand, which she claimed would glow in response to mana. Curious Mao was excited to try it, and when she did, it was sparkling, so this meant that if Takuma's sticker glowed, his ability was also activated. Anyway, Noel returned to her original discussion on how Takuma seemed like a promising and easy-to-handle man, whom she would definitely consider as her future husband candidate. She asked to confirm whether he could tell whether someone told his true soulmate by kissing her, and before Takuma even had the chance to object or oblige, Noel seized his lips and did whatever she could with him. Thereafter, she asked him if he noticed anything or if he was just looking for an excuse to kiss anyone. Takuma told her that she had been way too casual with the kiss, but Noel felt that he should feel lucky and happy to have kissed a beautiful girl like her, because typically he wouldn't even get a handshake. Just then, a light shone brightly upon Noel, and a celestial being or goddess appeared, asking Takuma how he could dare keep her waiting by delaying his first kiss until that moment. The girls were surprised to see a goddess appear before them, and that goddess announced to Takuma that Noel was one of his soulmates, and he should take care of the thread of fate tying them both together. Noel, on the other hand, was busy praying to the goddess to boost the rate at which she got rare item drops and help her grandfather leave a long wife, while the goddess laughed and said Noel would make a great wife. All this was a little too much for Takuma, but the goddess said that he had been too passive in finding his soulmate, so she secretly gave him a blessing out of frustration. That blessing was known as Lucky Cultured Fool, which was one that increased his chances of contact with women. Instantly, Takuma remembered all the occasions on which he had cultivated Liz's wet, fertile garden, and the goddess told him to be quicker next time. At the same time, she turned to leave and winked at Mao just before she did. After disappearing, Noel was crazy with excitement because she had seen a goddess face to face. On the other hand, Liz seemed not to have put herself together because she was still in shock, having seen a goddess physically. The next day, Takuma and the gang bid the kids at the orphanage goodbye, but Noel was pretty pissed because they had turned down the rewards, leaving most of the magic stones at the orphanage. Takuma assured her that he had just enough stones left for their travel expenses, but Noel said she would have been the only bad guy if she hadn't left some of her rewards. Besides, Takuma raised his own reputation by fixing the children's tattered clothes and even forced Noel to place a barrier for them. Liz said that Noel was so kind, and she found herself sharing a laugh with Takuma and blushing right after laughing with him. But just then, some knights approached them in a hurry and told them to stop right there. They were, apparently, knights from the royal capital, and they surrounded Takuma's party, telling them not to resist and stay still if they wanted to remain unharmed. The next thing they knew, Takuma and the girls were locked behind bars, so Takuma was enraged as he asked them why they were being arrested. Noel blamed Takuma for doing something creepy in town, but one of the knights said it was disgusting to see them argue with each other because they were vile kidnappers and that they won't leave there alive. The guy apparently was accusing them of abducting his sister and said that the crime was punishable by death. It was then that Takuma looked around and realized that Liz wasn't there, and he asked the elf knight what he was talking about. Again, he mentioned that if it was Liz, she was one of their traveling companions, and the guy insisted that they shouldn't speak his sister's name so casually. While doing that, he blasted a hole in the wall using a fireball, but his subordinates told him to calm down and not end their lives recklessly. Because their crime hadn't been confirmed, and it would be bad if they murdered an innocent. The captain remained unfazed, saying that even breathing the same air as his sister was a grave sin. Noel begged for her life, saying she was no kidnapper, and she barely even knew the creepy old guy beside her, who may or may not have taken advantage of her and Liz. This further annoyed the captain, and he said he hoped the idiot hadn't laid his filthy hands on Liz. But Marvel asked what he meant by laying his hands, and he went deep into saying that he meant touching his sister in any way. Marvel innocently apologized that she had touched Liz a lot, so the captain's subordinates begged him not to take his rage out on someone the size of a peanut. Mao innocently added that Liz's melons were so wonderful, and she had to touch them, but Takuma had warned her not to recklessly do so, so she only did it once. The captain was calm and said he wasn't mad at her, but he only had to be sure that Takuma didn't partake in any of the touching. However, Mao opened her big mouth to say they had both touched them together, and Takuma should apologize. At this point, Takuma knew no apology could rescue him from the captain's blazing wrath, and the guy summoned a nasty fireball which could transform him into dead meat. But just before he could explode that cell, Liz showed up excitedly and was gladly reunited with Takuma and the rest. Her brother said that he was just interrogating the criminals, but Liz told him she had explained that Takuma and the others were her traveling companions. Since she had obtained the king's permission, she opened the gates for them and they walked through the large halls of their palace. Apparently, the king had summoned Takuma and the rest. But just before then, Liz's brother acknowledged that allowing personal grudges to frighten people was a disgrace to his reputation as a knight. He introduced himself as Fornax, the second knight of the royal capital's order, and apologized, saying he had a sister complex, which was what guided his misbehavior. He acquainted himself with Mao, and Noel enthusiastically said she was a dwarf, and that her speciality was crafting tools and bestowing mana blessings. When Takuma thought they were on good terms enough for him to introduce himself, Fornax wouldn't even give him a listening ear because he hadn't forgiven him. He wasn't even impressed much, even after hearing that Takuma and Mao had contributed to protecting Liz on the way to the capital, because he still found Takuma suspicious. However, Fornax's subordinates apologized and said that it was due to his sister complex he was misbehaving in that manner, but he was a decent captain in the end. Eventually, they arrived at a round room which had some sort of sprinkly magical aura in it. It had an elevator, but in the sense that the whole floor was moving, and they could enjoy the beautiful view of the city. This was the town of Vanville, which was the royal capital, and Takuma expressed his amazement at the beauty of its architecture. They witnessed the first knight order marching as a group, and Takuma spotted Leica among them somewhere. After some time, they arrived before the king and knelt before him as the knights had done. However, Mao rambunctiously introduced herself with a hello and said that she was Liz's bodyguard. Takuma picked her up for his life, but the king burst out laughing, saying it was okay for her to raise her head. Apparently, Liz had already informed the king about their journey, and he thanked them for helping her. Apparently, Liz was like a daughter to him, so he was genuinely shocked when she received the divine prophecy. The king began to shed tears because he had been worried about Liz, but now he was relieved to see that she was okay. She apologized for making him worry and shared that her first journey was so exciting, and she ended up taking a few detours. Takuma asked why Liz and the king were that close, so she shared that her mother and the king were friends, and so they usually visited the capital frequently. Back when Liz was younger, she used to claim that she was in love with the king, and obviously Fornax found it disgusting. Anyway, on the main topic, the king asked Takuma if he knew Liz's mission, and when Takuma confirmed it, the king went on to say that the savior had already arrived in the capital. However, Liz and that savior had missed each other because the dude wanted to begin the journey to defeat the Demon King immediately and had departed for the next country already. Anyway, Fornax said that his Night Order would take over and safely escort Liz to the savior. Takuma and Mao realized that Liz would have to say goodbye already. But just then, the king said that there had been more contact with the demons lately, and the first Night Order that was seen earlier was sent to a village near the border. So the king ordered the second Night Order to stay at the castle, while Takuma and his gang would continue to protect Liz. Fornax said no way on earth would he entrust his sister to some guy who had no verifiable identity. So the king said that he had already investigated Takuma, and even though they didn't know his origins, Takuma hadn't shown any suspicious behavior and had once repelled an A-rank monster. Besides, Liz should gain more experience and continue her journey on her own, which was something she very much liked because she had great companions. Fornax wasn't having any of it and called the king a softie because, obviously, Liz was naive and too kind, while Takuma only cared about shooting hot sauce in her face. While he was busy making a fool out of himself, his subordinates told them that Fornax had panicked when he heard that Liz was setting out on a journey, and they even had to physically restrain Fornax from chasing her. The king was more excited than worried, although he was both, and he shared that he was getting nervous when worry took over him. Fornax went on to add that he had heard from Mao that Takuma had made indecent advances towards Liz, but the girl, who was flushed, said it was an accident. Her brother insisted that whether it was an accident or not, there was physical contact, and that meant Takuma wasn't fit to be with his sister. In fact, he challenged Takuma to a duel where the winner would travel with Liz. The king's right-hand man warned Fornax to watch his stinky mouth because this was the decision of a king. But the king already knew that once Fornax was in that state, he wouldn't budge. He then authorized the match between Fornax and Takuma, but said there would be a handicap because a duel between a knight captain and a rookie adventurer wasn't fair. Takuma wailed for his life, saying a match like that was impossible and begging Liz to help him out. But Liz knew deep within her that Takuma was fine. Fornax's subordinate asked him why he didn't feel lame to accept a duel knowing he would win with a handicap, but the idiot said he was willing to throw his pride away for his sister. At that moment, Takuma knew he was finished, while Fornax was itching to beat Takuma in front of everyone so that Liz would finally see what a loser he was. They eventually arrived at the training ground, and Fornax said the handicap for him was that if he dropped his sword or fell onto his knees, then that would be a win for Takuma, and that he could also use any dirty tricks he wanted. However, Fornax only wanted Takuma to show Liz how disgusting he was if he ever did resort to using tactics. Liz apologized on her brother's behalf, and Noel said that the match wasn't the problem, but Takuma was totally going to lose. However, Liz believed that since her brother was giving Takuma a handicap, he stood a chance of winning. Mao said she would cheer on for Takuma, and if he won, Liz might kiss him as a reward. All Takuma wanted to know was whether Liz was okay deciding on her travel partner that way, because he wasn't sure he and the girls were the right people for the job. Suddenly, his words got to her, and he braced himself with his bat. The king's assistant played as the referee who commenced the battle, and Fornax moved before Takuma could even blink his eye. Luckily, Takuma blocked his attack, but Fornax took things a notch higher by causing flames to come out of his sword and sending them towards Takuma. Even at that, he claimed he was still holding back, and Takuma had to admit that the flaming sword was seriously cool. Thereafter, Fornax decided to ramp things up by raining down fireballs of different sizes. With Takuma's miserable club, he tried bouncing them off and eventually survived it. However, he was surprised to know that despite all the fireballs, he barely got any real injuries, and that meant Fornax was really holding back on him. Fornax wondered why his sister had to travel with a guy that weak, because obviously Takuma could not protect her. Noel could tell that Takuma was being messed with, so they told him to get up from his knees. Even though Noel felt he should bow down and apologize, Lega said he felt Takuma still stood a chance, because Fornax was really underestimating Takuma and his decision to win. For one, it was very amazing that Takuma hadn't given up despite the overwhelming disadvantage. But Noel said that perhaps Takuma hadn't realized the power gap between himself and Fornax. Slowly but surely, Takuma stood up, and Mao told him to hit Fornax with his club, as if it were as easy as singing a nursery rhyme. So many thoughts were running through his mind, but he still decided to go through with the match. At the same time, Liz said she wanted to travel a bit longer with Takuma and the others. Even though she hadn't forgotten her mission to help the Savior, this was because all she needed was more time until they found the Savior, because, thus far, traveling with them had been so much fun. Listening to Liz being pretty serious and open about her desire to travel with them, Takuma realized that traveling with the Savior for Liz meant defeating the Demon Lord, meaning he had to help her locate her guy. His expression had changed and was evident to Fornax, but Fornax said that the situation hadn't changed because he still had the upper hand. He created a whirlwind of flames and sent them towards Takuma, but Takuma walked right into the flames, attempting to pin Fornax down in the middle of everything. But just then, there was an explosion behind him, and the king's attendant asked what was happening. Someone from the palace watchtower announced that a bunch of magical beasts had sneaked in through the northern outer walls. So it soon became an urgent call for the second or third knight's orders to protect the castle town. Fornax immediately announced that the match was postponed and they were headed to the scene. Takuma was worried, hoping the townsfolk were okay, but Noel said they would be fine with the knights handling it. Liz was worried that these monsters had broken through the castle's protection, but Noel told her that residential areas were usually protected by mana to repel beasts, so they were safe. But high-tier demons and beasts were less affected, and there had been sightings of stronger monsters, meaning it was pretty alarming. Just then, Mao climbed to the fence and pointed to where Fornax was fighting, showing Takuma the knight in action. They watched as Fornax dealt with a monster plant using his ability, the Spirit of Flame, which sent fiery arrows raining down upon the monster. That was when Takuma really acknowledged that the fireball Fornax had sent to him was just child's play. Liz realized that her brother never really wanted to hurt Takuma, because he had even given him a healing potion to keep him in check. Their conversation was interrupted when Mao heard someone screaming from a certain direction, and so they decided to run to the site. Just then, Mao lifted Takuma above her head and ran, while Liz and Noel followed behind. The palace attendant ordered Lega to take care of Liz and the rest, but he turned to find that there was no one there and wondered where they had gone. Apparently, they had come face to face with a serpent monster that was about to finish off a family. The child cried for help as the serpent opened its mouth to eat them, but just then, Mao landed on its head together with Takuma, shutting its mouth that instant. She tried to deal with it using some special kicking techniques, but right as Takuma moved to support the family that was rescued, the serpent lifted its tail and almost crushed Takuma with it. Luckily, Takuma somehow caught and blocked it, and with his bat, he struck its body. A powerful orb appeared and went straight from the serpent's head towards Takuma. He wondered whether he could block it with a club, but also knew that if he didn't, then the house behind him would be burnt to the ground. Luckily, Liz appeared before him with a magical barrier, which blocked that attack and sent it into the air. Noel came back, saying she had sent a signal for help, so they could hold out until someone arrived. On the other hand, the serpent monster sent another lightning strike towards them, so they had expected Liz to bring up another magic barrier. She tried to explain something to them, but no one was listening and told her to do it anyway. She chanted the spell, but this time around, nothing came out, and she had to explain that she was bad at magic. Again, she chanted it, and while they were all huddled up, some miraculous thing happened, and her magic barrier came out much bigger than the one she had done before. This successfully stopped the orb from destroying them, while Lega arrived at the dying minute and struck the snake's head. After defeating it, he said that was the last of the rampaging beasts, and Fornax later found out that his sister had been endangered, so again he started nagging about Takuma's incompetence. However, when he found out that his sister was safe, he calmed down and apologized to the family for putting them all in danger due to his lack of strength. He also thanked Takuma and his girls for protecting that family. While Takuma said that if Lega hadn't shown up, they would have been in trouble. Lega, on the other hand, said that Liz's magic barrier was amazing because it could block most attacks. Her brother, however, was surprised because he knew Liz was bad at magic, and so Liz said that perhaps it was all because of Takuma's power that her barrier could be activated. Noel agreed with this because the seal had a little moment where it lit up, and she had to just confess that Takuma was an enchanter with 0 mana. Mao asked Takuma whether he was tired, but he said he was okay and asked Lega for a brief conversation. All this while, the king and the sorcerer were staring at Takuma and his gun. The king said that Takuma showed up in town claiming to be searching for someone while dressed unusually. He had no prior sightings or testimony and also spoke of a suspicious-sounding oracle. The sorcerer said that it was presumptuous for such a commoner to speak of oracles because the so-called savior they had met the other day fit the legend in both ability and practice. And that oracle stuff was just tavern talk and nothing more, meaning he wasn't the same person. The most surprising thing that stood out was that Mao's race was unknown. Later, during workouts and training sessions, Mao was performing over 100 push-ups so effectively that Lega wondered whether she was a demon. Takuma, on the other hand, released chocolate pudding in his pants for every push-up, and he regretted asking for help to become stronger. Apparently, Lega had told him to do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 practice swings every day. Luckily, Takuma had learned some useful stuff, such as how to use weapons and how to take a fall, and Mao especially had learned how to take a fall. Everyone was proud of Mao, but Lega said that Takuma had also been impressive because, at his age, for a human, it was quite unusual for one to seek greater strength. Takuma said it was expected because now all he had was potential, and he seemed to have some kind of ability he didn't understand how to use. Lega told him that Noel had called him a no-mana enchanter, and Takuma said that it was one that activated sometimes and other times didn't. Since it was an unreliable skill, he figured that training his body was more of a solid path to gaining strength. Lega said he liked that practical side of him, and Takuma said that he wondered about the fact that the Demon King was supposed to be threatening world peace, yet he had not felt any sense of urgency from the people of the country, because they should be trying to catch up with the hero quickly. Lega said that it was expected because Liz was raised in the Elf Kingdom, and the Elf Kingdom was neutral in the war between the Demon King's army and the Allied forces. That area was far from the Demon King's territory, so it was hard to feel the threat directly, and the Demon King's army wasn't attacking recklessly either. However, journey traveling would make the danger feel real pretty soon. Anyway, Liz had been listening in on their conversation all this while, and no one saw her. Later at night, Liz was high on rotten berries and acting really weird, and much later, Takuma, Mao, and Lega joined them. Takuma shared that he couldn't even do half the sit-ups, let alone 100, but Lega said what mattered was doing it every day. Lega also said that Mao was stronger than most regular knights, and with combat experience, should get even stronger. Anyway, Fornax returned to his duties and told Mao to look after Noel and Liz, while he warned Takuma not to drag his sister down too much. Fornax's subordinates were surprised that their captain actually let Liz travel with a dude, but he said he only did so because he currently had to deal with the aftermath of the monster attack. Besides, Takuma didn't seem like a bad guy because he was pretty gutsy and Fornax felt he could trust him with his sister for a bit. Liz asked Fornax to do the right thing, and Fornax apologized for all he had done during Takuma's stay, and then he finalized by asking him to take care of his sister. At the time, Liz was woozy, so her brother said they should go in. However, his subordinates held him down and told Takuma to take Liz back to her room. When he did, he said he would get back downstairs to fetch Noel, but Liz said she would like a bath. Takuma said he would get a screen and hot water, but Liz insisted that he undress her. He asked her to wait for Noel, but she was so fussy and refused to. When he turned, she told him not to leave him because she would cry, so he just told her what to do and placed a blindfold on his eye while he instructed her on what to do. While he gradually helped her remove her clothing, he placed her in the bathroom and let her shower herself. Afterwards, he gave her a glass of water, and after a moment of silence, Liz confessed that he was amazing because when they had both met, he didn't look like someone who could fight to save his life, but right now he could face monsters and help a powerful brother head-on, and he even trained with Lega just to get stronger. Takuma replied that he was weak and didn't want to drag anyone down, but if he could get stronger, then of course he would want to. Liz said she wanted to get stronger too, but he told her she was strong enough as it was. She said she wasn't good at magic, and in the elf kingdom, where magic meant everything, she was considered a failure. But watching Takuma work hard made her want to improve her magic, and she was really happy after making that big barrier thanks to Takuma. So far, their journey had made her want to grow up and help the savior or hero, but she also enjoyed fighting using her flail. This love for her weapon started when she learned about the outside world and found the weapon and style that suited her best. Anyway, she wanted a goodnight kiss from Takuma, but he told her she was still totally wasted. On the other hand, Fornax set himself free and went searching for Takuma, but Noel stopped him, saying she had gone to check on Liz. Liz pinned Takuma down and insisted that she was not wasted while saying he had kissed Noel. Takuma said it wasn't a sleepover and reminded her that she looked like she didn't want to kiss him back then, but Liz said she was just embarrassed. Right now, she wanted to know if he was going to kiss her, and without waiting for his response, she went on to get it herself. Just then, the goddess appeared, and Liz was asleep. Apparently, she was another soulmate of Takuma's, whom the goddess had helped him find. She told him that if he could marry a monster or a demon girl next, that would be pretty amazing, and since he was connected to a lot of people, he should keep going. Later that night, Takuma returned from Liz's room, and Noel asked him whether anything had happened, but he denied it and took Mao to sleep. Right behind him was a cloaked elf, who had been desperately searching for Mao. The next day, Takuma, Noel, and Mao noticed Liz and her brother catching up and being also cute, while Noel asked Takuma what he had done with Liz. He denied anything had happened because he wanted it to be a secret, and thankfully, Liz seemed not to remember whatever happened last night. But that was when Mao opened her big mouth, asking how Noel's matchmaking went, and Noel, who had been caught, changed the topic from what happened the previous night to them going out shopping. Noel noticed Mao looking sad and asked why. She said she felt bad that they might be parting ways after shopping, and she didn't want to say goodbye to her just yet. Anyway, Noel said she would travel with Mao a bit longer because the girl was cute, and also, Takuma was her potential husband candidate, so she had to tag along and earn some cash. A few days later, in the throne room of the Elven Castle, the king informed Liz that the savior was headed for the border town of Kara, and he wanted Liz and her entourage to go there. Before they left, Fornax asked Takuma and the others to look after his sister, but Takuma was surprised because this same guy had clearly hated his guts ever since he got there. However, Fornax said that for Takuma to have maintained his composure in the same room with his sister, who was wasted, was nothing short of amazing, and he deeply regretted ever doubting him. And henceforth, he could protect Liz from evil from that day forth. Apparently, the idiot saw things this way because Noel had used a special sleeping dart to make his memory hazy. The royal sorcerer told them that there was a village on the way to the border city which worshipped dungeons, and travelers and adventurers often stopped there to pray for a safe journey, so it might be a good idea to stop by that village on the way. Takuma wondered who this dude in the robe was, and Noel felt he was from a certain cult. Apparently, Liz had mentioned the dude before, but Takuma couldn't remember where and what she said. Anyway, they also told them they might be lucky to meet a dragon in the border city, and Noel was more than droopy excited, because dragon drops were super rare, and they would be super lucky to pick up even a scale from the dragon. Mao shared in the excitement, and they agreed to leave to head there and bid the castle folks goodbye. They boarded a cart and stopped by somewhere for some rest and a little chat. Thereafter, they continued their journey, but arrived at a spot where a crowd was gathered because the bridge was broken. This meant they had to take a detour to the city of Carol, as they couldn't proceed without going around. However, a demon asked them to pay the fee and move along. Everyone took off, and some of the other villagers tried telling them to run as well, but Mao fell asleep. He acknowledged that she had decent mana and took her on in her challenge, but he ignored her and headed straight for Takuma because he looked weak. Incidentally, there was a dragon's head and then fire which surrounded them. The guy told Takuma to run or risk being eaten, and then a huge dragon appeared out of the blue, but instead of being terrified and running to safety, the ladies were busy appreciating the aesthetics. Seeing their defenselessness, the dragon picked Noel and Liz. By the time Takuma realized, they were already far gone. He told Mao they would have to chase after the girls quickly, and Mao immediately lifted him up and launched him right into the air while she herself jumped over the bridge and landed on the other side. Everyone there was in disbelief, while much later Mao and Takuma arrived at the village. There were so many people, but most importantly, Liz and Noel were safe, although dressed in rather unfamiliar attire. Apparently, the outfits belonged to shrine maidens, and the moment some creepy old bald dudes sighted them, they were glad that they would be able to proceed with the ceremony. The girls explained that, apparently, the guardian dragon of the village laid an egg for the first time in 10 years, and they were holding a celebration ritual, which required a shrine. However, since the bridge to the village collapsed, the assigned person couldn't come, which was why the dragon personally brought Noel and Liz over to their village, and the ritual could proceed safely. Takuma said it was amazing that the dragon himself had chosen them, and the girls agreed that the dragon really liked both of them, because if it didn't like them, it wouldn't let them go near its nest. Mal brought up the collapse of the bridge, and the girls said it may have been caused by the demons roaming around lately. Noel freaked out, wondering whether the current village they were in was being targeted by the demons, but the old man explained that the one being targeted was the dragon, because it possessed powerful mana, said to grant immortality. Apparently, the demons had repeatedly attacked the dragon but had been consistently defeated. Takuma was confused about demons, wondering whether they were stronger than beasts. So Noel said that demons were highly intelligent beasts that could take human form and were super dangerous. In particular, they had black skin and black horns and were considered to be S-rank or higher threats. This reminded Takuma of the guy he and Mao had met back then when they met, who might definitely be a demon as well. Just then, Mao sprang up with another of her fantasies, saying she wanted to be the shrine maiden and miss the dragon. However, the monks told her that the dragon didn't like men or children, meaning Mao couldn't have her dream fulfilled and would have to wait at the inn during the ceremony. The old man later gave them an inn, and somewhere around, they saw an inscription of a story about the dragon, which had been passed down for generations. Just then, Liz showed up completely undressed and daintily saying she didn't know how to wear her maiden outfit. The old man was terrified, and Mao had to close Takuma's eyes to prevent him from getting blinded by her beautiful jugs. The poor monk had to push Liz into her room, saying they would call someone right away to help her out. Much later, they ascended a staircase which led them to the venue of the dragon ritual. Liz and Noel brought a serving of expired grape juice for the dragon, although Noel was doing it in exchange for one skew of the dragon's body. They noticed the dragon's 3 eggs, while the dragon chugged down the juice they had served him. Meanwhile, Mao was busy wishing that the dragon would visit her to play, just as she had heard from the other kids. But just then, she heard a sound coming from one door in the cave and thought someone was playing hide-and-seek. She heard a voice, and both she and Takuma opened the door forcefully, which led them to meet a lady who was tied down. Apparently, she was the shrine maiden, and she said that a demon had locked her in there and was pretending to be her at the ceremony. What is the demon's mission at the ceremony, and can Takuma's gang stop her before it's too late? Type "Kiss the Goddess" for the second part of this story. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. As always, thanks for watching.